Alrighty then. Did they have a pomp and circumstance type of funeral for L. Ron Hubbard, or were they cavalier about his body, thus not giving much ceremony to his death, but rather choosing to focus on the idea that he had gone to Target 2? How does a Scientologist deal with death? Are they discouraged to mourn because the dead, especially if old, are now moving on to a better situation? How will one know in a future lifetime that they signed a billion-year contract if they were in the Sea Org? If they miraculously would know somehow, how come there are not those that have died of, say, some disease in 1972 that are not now saying, okay, I'm a different person, but I remember I signed a billion-year contract in the Sea Org, so here I am again. And if you didn't show up to fulfill your billion-year contract, would you be in breach of said contract? And if so, what and who would enforce the punishment? All right, well, that was about 6 or 7 questions. I think I didn't count them all, but let's go ahead and talk about this. I've talked about death in Scientology before. In fact, I made a whole video about it. So I will refer you to that, and I'll put a link to it in the notes below so you can check that out. But what I was interested in with all of your questions there was the Sea Org contract stuff and the things about guys coming back from past lives where they were Scientologists or Sea Org members. And I will take this up because you asked the question as though it was some sort of understood thing that nobody's ever come back saying they were a past life Scientologist or Sea Org member. And the fact of the matter is there has been instances of that. There have been people who were recruited into the Sea Org who claimed, this is my second time around, or who, while they were in Scientology, started getting auditing and then started recalling, you know, that they were in Scientology and in the Sea Org last time around. And so long as their, you know, their facts line up somewhat, you know, straight. I mean, in other words, if they say they were in the Sea Org, but that they died in 1960, well, that's not going to work because the Sea Org wasn't even founded until 1967. So something like that, Scientologists would go, yeah, no, I don't think so. But if you had some guy who, you know, said that he died in 1972 and he was coming back around and now he was, 20 years old or something, and he's getting into Scientology and he says, yeah, I was in the Sea Org last lifetime, nobody in Scientology is going to say, no, you weren't. Nobody's going to say that, right? In fact, they're going to go, wow, that's awesome, dude. That's amazing. Wow. You know, because it doesn't happen that often. There's not a lot of people who do that. And nor should there be, because there weren't a lot of people in the Sea Org before 1972. You know, it was a few hundred people with all the, you know, revolving door of people going in and out. I don't even know if it was even 200 people by 72, maybe. 300, 400. I really couldn't say. I've never done a census on early Sea Org membership, but it was not a lot of people. And no, there's nobody running around enforcing past life contracts. I mean, there's not even any way to do that. The place where that sort of thing would tend to come up in the world of Scientology would be in an auditing session, where a person would be recalling past life incidents. Now, if they started talking about, I was in the Sea Org last lifetime to their auditor, the auditor is not going to then start recruiting the person for the Sea Org or start, holding them accountable to their responsibilities to their billion-year contract or something. That's just not going to happen. And the information that's in an auditing session would be, that kind of information at least would be confidential. Nobody's going to go talking about that stuff. But mainly the people who say that kind of thing in session will then go out of session and talk about it to other people outside of it, especially if they're interested in joining the Sea Org or they're sort of thinking about it or wondering about it or something like that. And they've, kind of drunk enough Kool-Aid in Scientology to start thinking that that would be a good thing to do. So that's kind of how that sort of thing happens. And if the person were to start talking about that, you can bet that a Sea Org recruiter would absolutely start like, hey, come on, man, you got responsibilities, you got to do this. If you were, around last lifetime, it's certainly your duty to come back in now. They would have no qualms or scruples about pushing those buttons in trying to get the guy to sign up now. So, and I saw that. I observed that happen. I didn't do that kind of recruitment, but I certainly did see it. So I could, that's why I can talk with some certainty about this. As far as Hubbard's funeral goes, he was cremated within a day or two of his body being discovered, if I remember right. It was within days, almost immediately. And and his ashes scattered. And the event that was done at the Hollywood Palladium, where David Miscavige emceed it, was all about how Hubbard had gone on to Target 2 and had shed his mortal coil, so to speak, had shed his body as a distraction, I think was the word that he used, to his further OT researches. But all of that was just, stuff and nonsense entered in to tell the public, because Hubbard actually didn't die in very good circumstances. He was, on drugs, and he was old and senile, and he was, really losing his mind. And it was kind of, when he died, it was sort of like, okay, good, thank God he finally died, so kind of thing. Very few people actually knew much about it, or, the circumstances of it, where he even was physically located. And that's a whole nother story which has been told, and I'm not going to retell it here. But no, there was no pomp and circumstance with his funeral, and you can, if you want the whole story on that, you can check that out on Google, because it's well documented.